Welcome back to the channel. So this one is the start of a bit more of an involved build. So for this video we've just got mainly just the build, and then in the second part we're going to tackle the painting and weathering. So this is the BT2 from Hobby Boss. You get two exhaust outlet versions, which there's a lot of hope going forward that this is going to lead to some more BT variants. It hasn't happened yet, but certainly the BT5, some of those exhaust outlets are certainly seen in that as well, and a BT5 would be a nice addition to have in the 1/35th range, because we only got the old Italieri kit, so we'll watch this space. But there's a couple of versions of this out, one with more open wheels and a few other differences, and there's also a cannon armed version as well. Quite a lot of these were used in the war against Finland as well, and some were captured by the Finnish, so there's quite a few options, but it's very early war Soviet armour, in fact pre-war in many instances. So just looking across, we've got a couple sink marks there just at the front of the model that we need to sort out, and we'll come to. So just add a bit of filler in there and sand it back, and all is well. It goes away quite easily, not much of a problem. And just mating up the upper hole now to the section of the lower hole, which is a kind of tub that you already get made up. Snaps right in, it's no problem. Nice fit. And there we go, we've got a recess there which takes some of the suspension as well for the Christie running gear, which is a kind of feature of this and British cruiser tanks. Both use the same thing really, and it can actually be run on the wheels on hard ground and take the tracks off, and you'll see why I mentioned that in a minute. So just working out here how the engine louvers are going to go in, or the air intake louvers. It's because you've got a grill that goes over this, but you've got these louvers move, and you can leave them movable as well with a bit of careful gluing. Just got two side, well, I suppose they're the parts that run along the edges, and they clamp the movable parts. So as I say, if you use a bit of careful gluing, there you go, they're open. Well, they're openable. If that's something that you want, it's something you can bear in mind, or you can obviously glue them shut. And then this is the frame for the etched metal grill. We've got a template there for drilling out the light. Well, the holes for the light mounts. In hindsight, I should have left these off because the lights aren't very good in this kit. Towards the end, I get the clear parts out. I don't like the look of it, so I just cut them off and drill down as if they've been taken off. So now we're starting to put the bracing in for some of the suspension units in the side of the hull. Now, this is all reasonably detailed, but you don't really see any of it afterwards. So you'll see I've left some tabs on where I haven't sanded stuff back. I'm just kind of leaving it a bit rough and just forcing it in. But I'm showing you so that you can actually see what we get. It's pretty good. So this is like the bracing for the... It's kind of like a hollowed out section on the side of the hull, and it has a plate that goes over the side of it. So that's just showing you what's there in behind that. And I don't really know what this part's for, but it makes up it completes that little arm there that's sticking out the side at the front to get those glued on. You see there's a gaping hole there in the side of the front portion there, which takes the fender, one of the front fenders, and we'll come to that in a minute, but it's a bit of a strange way to go about it. Got the driver's door going on there, which can obviously be posed open if you want to. Now we've got quite a complex swing arm, I suppose it is. I don't really know what it would be called. It's part of the forward running gear. So it's the wheel at the front, which actually has quite a lot going on with it. So it can turn when not in the tracked form. When it's not got the tracks running around it, and it's also got its own suspension as well. It's not the powered wheel. The powered wheel's actually at the back, and we'll see that in a minute, because obviously once you take the tracks off, the sprocket has to drive the wheel, which then drives the rest of the wheels. So it's quite a complicated design. But anyway, the way this goes on, this is the first bit. So we've got the mounting arms that come out of the side of the hole at the front there, which is just going on now, and then they slot into the upright on that swing arm. A little bit of fiddling about with tweezers, but it's simple enough. I'm leaving the swing arm movable and trying to fix it with just mating it in between this bracket that's coming down here. Ultimately it all gets glued up, but I wanted to leave a bit of play so I could level it up. I'm always worried about getting the running gear sitting level. It's hard enough as it is, let alone when you can move stuff, or even if you've got workable suspension, let alone when you haven't. So now we've got all of the parts of the suspension on and the swing arms, and nothing's glued in yet. I'm going to glue it up once we actually get the wheels on, so we can level stuff up. And we've just got the portion at the rear to go now, which is where the drive wheel is, which is actually the sprocket, but it looks like an idler, but it's not. It's a sprocket. It's the traditional Russian stuff. Same on the T34. It's not like a toothed sprocket. So this here, where my thumb is, that's holding on the... there's gearing there, which means that the sprocket can drive the wheel in front of it, and that is how it drives the tank along when it's not on the tracks. That's my understanding. I was looking this up when I was building this, but I must admit this was a long time ago when I was doing this. Now, I do remember that there's an interesting part here about Christie tanks. You'll see in a minute this part that goes on, that allows us to move the wheel around. Now, Hobby Boss has you glue that section in, that sort of washer that I slipped in there. Don't glue it in, because if you do, this semicircle kind of plate there in the middle of the wheel, it's got a flattened top. We'll see it in a minute. You need to make sure that's movable, which hopefully it is. There we go. So that allows us to position how the wheel will sit when it's on the tank. And it's got a flattened off circle basically, and the flat part needs to face upwards, and that doesn't move. That's a fixed part. The wheel moves around that washer, so it's an important thing to get right. And the way Hobby Boss have designed the kit, it doesn't actually sit where it should. We'll come back to that later on, but if it doesn't get shown, that's just make sure that flattened off the flattened off circle is level with the tank. So now I'm filling that great big hole where the fenders go in. So I've put a piece of plastic in there and just covered it with some super glue. And you can see we've got all the parts now, swing arms, the whole lot, ready to be covered over, all still movable, which makes life a lot easier. So that is the size of the hole. And even when you actually put the fender in, there's still a gap around it. It's a strange idea from Hobby Boss. I mean, you could have done it a different way, I think. It seems, maybe drilled 2 holes from the inside if you wanted to have it. But to have a gaping hole like that is a bit much. So I just cut the tab off from the fender, glue it in, and then put some super glue over it. I do a bit too much, always the same on camera. You do it fine one side, turn the camera on, it all goes to pot. And then just use some accelerator. Again, a bit too much, it spreads the glue, runs a bit. But luckily, I notice it, and off it goes. You'll see it now in real time. See it just gas off. And there it is going. And now the super glue is rock hard. So, leave it a minute and you could sand that back now. It's as hard as it's going to be. The chemical reactions happened. That's it. The glue is set. Accelerate is always a good thing, especially if you're doing stuff like rigging and all that sort of thing, where, you don't want to just touch and it sticks. So now we're on to the sprocket, which doesn't look like your traditional toothed sprocket. So what you've got here is a very overcomplicated way of making this. However, I suppose it's quite detailed. So you've got these small wheels that are sort of jog wheels inside the 2 parts of the wheel, and they spin and grab the track and keep it all moving, and that's how it pushes the track around. They grab the tooth. So in these tracks, a bit like T34, you've got a tooth track and a non-tooth track. guide horn, sorry. So you've got a guide horn in one track and a no guide horn in the next one, then a guide horn, and that's how it catches the track and moves it around. So this was reasonably tricky. You've got to kind of get them in there and then sandwich it between the two sides and level them up so they're in both holes. And of course, as soon as you get around to one, it then comes loose again. But if you persevere, you'll get there in the end, and then you can just clamp it, make sure it sets. A bit more glue and letting that set. So just sprayed up where I filled those holes, just to check how it's looking, check some seams, and you can see that there is a little bit of a mark there showing, so I do sand that back again. It's always best to check the seams, just to make sure everything's doing what you want it to do and what you expect it to do. We just got to sand that back a little bit. Quite tricky getting in there in between the rivets, but I've done it again and sprayed it up again, and you can see that it's pretty much gone now. And we're just getting these parts of the forward running gear sorted. So we've also got an idler that's going up here now as well, and that's fixed at this point. Kind of a bit by hook or crook, I must admit. Sort of lining it up by eye, making sure it's all in line. And now we've got the section here where we're going to actually turn the front wheel. And here you can see I'm just trying to bend it back where I've actually got it out of line. This is the trouble with all of this. It's a lot of vagaries. I mean, there's not really any easy way of lining any of this up other than by eye. And here I can show you now that how it turns. So you've got a rod there, which obviously moves between this kind of hollowed out pole there at the front. And we're just trying to show you that I've cut one down one side and pushed it out a little bit the other side, and tilted the turning wheels as well, so that it's all relatively in line and at the same angle. There's a little bit of play, so you can sort it out. And then this is how it goes, and it just gives the model a bit of a unique feature. So this isn't a design of the kit, but all the parts are there to do it. It's not too tricky. You can see there's a little bit of play in it, but once you've glued them on and lined it up, it's quite a nice feature. And obviously you can only do that if you're going to pose it with the wheels off. And this is where I'm just showing that flattened off circle. You can just see in the middle of that wheel. It's what we need to have facing upwards. So that part there I'm pointing out, it needs to be cut off and drilled, because it's a mount for the side fender, the front fender, sorry. Now just closing in all of the running gear with a nice plate that slots right in. Actually, it's a perfect fit, no problem. Just a touch of extra fin to run it in there, and we can go about building up the actual hole now and getting it all ready, and then move on to the turret. So again, a little bit of a problem. The door, the main access door for the turret, doesn't quite fit, because the way that they've moulded the hinges, it fouls how the door actually sits. So it's fine if you want to pose it open, probably quite good if you want to pose it open, but I didn't. I wanted to pose mine shut. So there was nothing for it. I have to cut off the offending parts of the hinge that are sticking out. And in fact, it's actually pushing you to get a figure, isn't it? Which I probably should have done, but we're not quite there yet. So to go about fixing this, we just get a nice sharp blade on the knife. We cut out these sections of the hinge, but we want to keep them, so don't let them fling off. So it's just a nice sort of pre-cutting it here so it doesn't ping off. And now we can just slice it along the edge there, like so. Get those bits off and let them drop onto the desk. It's all tricky stuff, I must admit. I didn't expect this build to go quite like this, but once you're in it and you start doing these things, it kind of takes on a, well, it kind of leads you, I suppose, down the garden path, up the garden path, leads you into a good place. But there you go. You can see now we can glue that on and get it in the right spot, and then we just glue those parts of the hinge back on. Now we're on to the mantlet, and this is movable, I believe. Typical Hobby Boss, a little bit overcomplicated for what it is, but nevertheless, it fits fine. What they're trying to do works, and we get to where we need to be. You actually get the cannon in this kit. I don't know whether you could actually make it up. Possibly you could. It didn't seem like anything was missing. But there are two different types of wheels that have been moulded. So you've got some that are hollow and some that are solid, and this is the kit with the solid wheels. Quite like the wheels in the other BT2 kit. I think it's BT2 early and then a BT2 mid-late. But I can't really see what the difference is other than the wheels, to be honest, and I'm not sure that is the early and late difference. The BT tanks are all a bit of a mystery to me, I must admit. I do like them, and they crop up. When you start building a lot of different tanks, they do crop up. Certainly if you're looking at British tanks. And it runs into the T-34 as well, obviously. Not quite the same, but it's obviously based on it. Now we got the slide moulded barrel going on, which is it's an alright fit. I'm trying to show you there that there's a bit of play, but it is, it's okay, to be honest. And then slotting it into the turret. We've also got a machine gun mount on this one as well that sticks out at an angle, which is a bit of an odd concept. It throws off the symmetry of the turret as well, makes it look a bit weird in kind of a quirky way. It's a very 30s design, this. It's a bit of an old tank. But there we go, turret's looking okay, all closed up. Now we've got the side fenders going on. We've got some pretty hefty ejector pin marks underneath, which are actually positive ones. They're sticking out instead of being recessed. So that's easy enough, just trim them off. Don't really need to worry about sanding it back too much. It's good enough. Once it's sort of blended, it's no problem. We're going to chuck a bit of mud up in there as well. Not that I like to encourage covering mistakes with mud, but in this case we do a little bit. Just buffing out any seams there on the side of the fenders, and then it's time to slot those in. And it is a very nice fit. It sort of hooks around the back a little bit when you actually line it up correctly, and it sort of slots down the back and all just sits exactly where it needs to sit. Very nice. Good, impressive fit. Nice engineering, just what you want. And it looks the part. We don't beat it up too much. It's quite a high fender. I mean, you could bend out the rear, I suppose, but certainly the side fender is reasonably high. It's just out the way of most problems. But obviously you could, change it out for etch. And speaking of etch, we get a nice Photo-etched fret with this kit. And we've got these tie-down clasps that sit on the side. And you'll see what these are for in the next video, where we actually tie down the tracks. But what they're for is to put a sort of leather belt around the tracks and stow them along the top of the side fender, which is how we pose this model. So that is what we do in the end. I'm just showing you the different complex bends here. When working with small bits of Photo-etched, you've just got to kind of get the tools that work for you. Flat-ended tweezers, ones that don't make it go ping, and then just try and work around it as best you can. Get comfortable, and it's fine in the end. Once you start sort of getting into a groove that you like, people tend to be a bit daunted by Photo-etched, and I don't think that it's not necessary. It's a useful tool to have in the belt working with Photo-etched, so you shouldn't shy away from it. And a few complex bends later, and we're just coming up now to the last piece. It nearly flings away, but there we go. That's what all the work was for, and you'll be happy to know we've got to do 6 of those, so we've got 5 more to go. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened here. I was just about to place it in and the file sort of stops. So it's obviously got corrupted somewhere. But you see the one glued under my hand, and I was just about to place that one and it just went. So believe me, it just went in nicely. So they're all along the side of the hole. Now we're trying to roll the mesh over the engine, engine deck, the air intake, I suppose. Because we've got quite a serious curve on the edge of these, just using some an X-Acto blade handle, just to try and roll that around. I'm just trying to bend it around the curve, so I'm not getting sharp bends. Just to try and get me into the kind of shape that I want, and then I use super glue to anchor that down. It's quite difficult. You know, if it was a tube, you could roll it up to a tube, but being this sort of shape, you just want to kind of help it along the curve, and then the super glue should be adequate to pin it down. Just put a couple blobs of super glue there along the middle bar. Now we're going to offer that up. Once this clamps in quite nicely, that should do a lot of the job of fixing it in position, and then you can bend round one side and bend round the other, and then it'll be glued up, and there you go. No problem whatsoever. The metal is a little bit stiff. You can always warm it up by using a lighter or just a candle or something like that. Just try and just get a little tiny bit of heat into the metal, and it makes life easier when you go to try and bend it. Now just offering that up to the model, making sure everything's where we want it to be and that it fits and looks the part. It's obviously a feature of the model there, and it's quite a large bit of etch. And these brackets here just go on the edge and they clamp it down. And we've got another little bit of bending, which isn't too bad, but it is some strange sort of. It doesn't really tell you how you're meant to bend it, and it's kind of a foot, and then with a curved section that goes underneath the exhaust muffler. I guess it sits out the back. So again, just to get that curve, we're just bending it in. Sorry about the focus. There you go. That's what the bend's for, to follow that curve underneath the muffler, and then it sits at a kind of angle, and that's what it does right there. So there we go. The model is kind of nearing the end. We just got one big thing to go after this, but just showing you all the photo etch added. It's usually a nice part of the model when you've cleared the photo etch sheet. And we just got some deflectors, I guess. I don't know what they are. Don't know if it's armor or not. I think it's deflectors for the telescopic sight or something like that. Maybe it is armor of some sort, not sure. But those two bits go on the side of the gun, which is quite nice. Again, vague placement. And of course, now we're on to tracks. So even though we're not going to be posing the tracks on the model, we still have to go through and build the tracks and clean them up. Now, unfortunately, there is a little bit of cleanup on this because where you've got a shallow kind of a dip in one side, it's like pressed steel. So it's got a press in one side and it's flat the other side. You've actually got the sprue tabs on the inside. We've also got ejector pin marks on the inside as well. So I just use a bit of extra fin just to kind of give it like a cast texture feel, I suppose, just to try and blend it through so you don't really see the ejector pin mark or anything else for that matter. When I looked online, you know, some of them do have quite a rough texture. So just on a bit of double-sided sticky tape, which is a little bit too sticky. It's better if you de-tack it a little bit. Just start putting the track runs together. I did work out how long they need to be. I think I worked out what the number was and just split it into 3, and that's how they stowed them in one run. And then they bring all 3 runs off, put them together, wrap them around the wheel, put the pin in, and there you go. So once you've got it all glued together on the double-sided sticky tape, a nice flat ruler just pushes it off, and then you lift up one end, slide it onto the ruler, and you're good to go. You can transport it then to wherever you want. In this case, the side fender of the model. So just slide it on, and that's how the tracks are stowed along there. So this is where you can start to have a bit of fun with it now on how you're going to pose these tracks. You need to make them natural. So obviously sweeping down the rear fender there. So we bend them down around that and try and bend them in where there's a few bits of uneven surface, and just for a bit of interest, to just fold one track end down at over this edge. And then we get all 3 runs on, and I'm just kind of putting them together so we can kind of get them to naturally lie how we want them to go. And this is the idea. They kind of fold in like that, and then you hook the leather belts around them. And now just a little bit of glue just to make it bend in how we want. So that's it. That brings this video to a close, and next week we're going to be looking at painting the model and weathering it to this point, as you can see in this picture, and that's how we'll finish up this build. So thanks for watching. As usual, if you have any comments, please let me know down in the comment section below. If you like the video, please consider giving it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.